Eryndor had not known light for over 1,000 years. The sky, once vibrant with the hues of dawn and dusk, was now a suffocating void, blanketed by a sentient darkness that corrupted everything it touched. The last remnants of humanity clung to life within the fortified walls of the Citadel of Emberlight, a haven built around ancient technology that emitted a flickering golden radiance. This fragile light was their only shield against the monstrous horrors lurking beyond the walls. Kaldor Vey stood at the edge of the northern parapet, his armor battered and dulled from years of combat. The distant wails of shadow beasts echoed through the air, a grim reminder of the war that never truly ended. Once hailed as one of Emberlight's greatest warriors, Kaldor now bore the stigma of exile, marked by the crimson seal scorched onto his shoulder plate. Defiance had cost him everything. "They'll be coming for you soon," a voice said behind him. Kaldor turned to see an elderly oracle, draped in layers of tattered silver robes. Her clouded eyes stared into nothingness, yet her movements were sure as she approached. "I don't have time for riddles, seer," Kaldor replied, his voice edged with bitterness. The oracle tilted her head, as though considering him. Then, with a trembling hand, she held out an object wrapped in cloth. "You do not see the path yet, but it is already laid before you. Take this." Kaldor hesitated before unwrapping the bundle. Inside was a shard of obsidian, its surface etched with faint, golden runes that pulsed like a heartbeat. He felt a strange warmth emanating from it, as though it were alive. "What is this?" "A fragment of the Light Forge," the oracle whispered. Her voice trembled with both reverence and urgency. "The weapon that once banished the darkness. Its power lies dormant, waiting for one who dares to wield it. You must awaken it, Kaldor." Kaldor shook his head. "I'm no savior. I'm just a soldier. A failed one at that." The oracle stepped closer, her bony fingers gripping his arm with surprising strength. "The darkness grows bold. It senses the end is near, but so too does the light. You were chosen for this, whether you believe it or not." Before Kaldor could respond, the warning bells of Emberlight rang out, sharp and frantic. A cacophony of shouts rose from the walls as shadow beasts surged against the citadel's defenses. The creatures were larger and more numerous than any attack in recent memory, their shapes twisting and shifting as though born of nightmares. Kaldor's instincts took over. He drew his blade, a worn but reliable weapon, and sprinted to join the defenders. The battle was chaos. The citadel's light projectors flickered under the strain, casting uneven rays that barely held the monsters at bay. Soldiers fought valiantly, but for every beast they felled, two more seemed to take its place. In the midst of the carnage, Kaldor saw something that froze him in place. A tear in the sky itself, a swirling vortex of pure darkness. From it emerged a towering figure, its form indistinct but radiating malice. The primordial darkness had sent an avatar to the battlefield. Kaldor's grip tightened around the shard. Its runes flared brighter as if reacting to the entity's presence. The warmth he'd felt earlier now surged through him, filling him with an unfamiliar sense of purpose. He knew, instinctively, that this was no ordinary relic. But before he could act, a deafening crack shattered the air. The largest of the shadow beasts slammed into the northern wall, breaching it in a cascade of stone and dust. The defenders faltered, their formations breaking as panic set in. "Fall back!" someone shouted, but Kaldor refused to retreat. With the shard in one hand and his blade in the other, he charged toward the breach. The glowing runes seemed to guide his movements, his strikes precise and devastating. He carved through the lesser creatures with ease, their forms disintegrating under the shard's radiance. But the avatar of darkness loomed closer, its gaze fixed on him. Kaldor felt its presence pressing into his mind, whispering promises of power and threats of oblivion. He gritted his teeth, pushing forward despite the weight of its malevolence. Before he could reach it, the oracle's voice rang out once more, clear and commanding despite the chaos. "Kaldor, you cannot fight this battle here. The shard's true power lies elsewhere. Go." Kaldor turned to see her standing amidst the rubble, her frail form illuminated by the shard's light. She extended her hand, and for a brief moment, her blind eyes met his. "I believe in you," she said, before the darkness consumed her. Kaldor's chest tightened, but he knew she was right. The citadel was lost, and staying would mean certain death. He clutched the shard and ran, slipping through a hidden escape route as the darkness closed in behind him. As he emerged into the Shadowlands, the shard pulsed with renewed energy, lighting his path forward. For the first time in years, Kaldor felt something stir within him, a flicker of hope. The journey to awaken the Lightforge had begun. Kaldor trudged through the ashen wilderness, the shard's faint glow his only guide. The air was thick with the acrid stench of decay, and the ground beneath him crumbled like old parchment. The Shadowlands were a place forsaken by time and light, a stark reminder of the Voritha's growing influence. He glanced at the shard in his hand. Its golden runes pulsed steadily, their rhythm matching the thrum in his chest. The oracle's final words echoed in his mind. The shard's true power lies elsewhere. But where? His path was unclear, and doubt gnawed at the edges of his resolve. The faint sound of movement snapped him from his thoughts. He dropped into a crouch, his hand instinctively gripping the hilt of his blade. From the gloom, a figure emerged, tall and broad-shouldered, carrying a heavy maul. The man's face was lined with grime and exhaustion, but his eyes burned with fierce determination. "Hold there," the man barked, his voice rough but steady. "You don't look like one of them, but I've been fooled before." Kaldor slowly raised his hands, careful not to provoke. "I'm no shadow beast, just a traveler. Name's Kaldor. And you?" "Riven," the man said, lowering his maul slightly. "Blacksmith, or at least I was before the Vorith turned my village to cinders." "What's your business in this wasteland?" Kaldor hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "I'm searching for something. A way to fight back against the Vorith." Riven snorted, his expression skeptical. "Fight back? Against that?" He gestured to the horizon, where the faint outline of Voritha's fortress loomed like a festering wound. "You're either a fool or a madman. Maybe both," Kaldor replied with a faint smirk. "But the shard I carry, it's part of something ancient. Something that can destroy the Vorith." Riven's gaze dropped to the glowing relic, his eyes narrowing. "That's old magic. Dangerous. And if you're carrying it, you're likely hunted." "Probably," Kaldor admitted. "But I can't stop now. I need to find the next piece of the weapon, the Lightforge. Do you know anything about it?" Riven's expression shifted, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. "There's a place, a ruin deep in the echoing vale. The elders spoke of it as a sanctuary of light, long abandoned. If your shard's connected to anything, it might be there." Kaldor nodded. "Then that's where I'm headed." Riven hefted his maul, stepping closer. "You won't make it alone. The vale is crawling with shadow beasts, and worse. I'll guide you." Kaldor studied the man for a moment, sensing both weariness and resolve. "I won't turn down help." Together, they set off, the shard's glow lighting their way. Though the darkness pressed in from all sides, Kaldor felt a small spark of hope ignite. For the first time, he wasn't walking alone. The echoing vale was a graveyard of forgotten civilizations, its jagged cliffs and crumbling ruins bathed in an eerie, perpetual twilight. Kaldor and Riven moved cautiously along the broken path, their footsteps echoing against the cavernous walls. The shard in Kaldor's hand pulsed brighter as they descended deeper into the vale, its glow illuminating ancient carvings etched into the stone. "This place doesn't feel right," Riven muttered, tightening his grip on his maul. "It's too quiet." Kaldor nodded but said nothing. The air was thick with tension, as though the vale itself was holding its breath. The shard's warmth steadied his nerves, but his every sense was on high alert. As they approached the heart of the vale, the ruins grew more elaborate. Massive pillars inscribed with runes, staircases leading nowhere, and fragments of statues depicting long-forgotten deities. At the center stood an ancient dais, its surface marked by intricate symbols that glowed faintly in the shard's light. "This must be it," Kaldor said, stepping forward. The shard in his hand vibrated with increasing intensity, pulling him toward the dais. Riven hung back, scanning their surroundings. Whatever you're about to do, do it fast. We're not alone. Kaldor placed the shard into a circular indentation at the center of the dais. The runes flared to life, bathing the area in golden light. A low hum filled the air as the dais began to shift, revealing a hidden compartment beneath. Inside lay another fragment of the light forge, a blade, broken but still radiating power. As Kaldor reached for the fragment, a deafening roar erupted from the shadows. The air grew cold, and the ground trembled as a massive shadow beast emerged from the darkness. Its form was twisted and grotesque, a swirling mass of claws and tendrils with glowing red eyes that burned with malice. "Move!" Riven shouted, charging at the creature with his maul raised. Kaldor snatched the fragment and turned to face the beast. The shard in his other hand flared brilliantly, its light pushing back the creature's encroaching darkness. The beast howled in fury, lashing out with tendrils that cracked the stone around them. Riven's maul struck one of the tendrils, shattering it with a burst of sparks, but the creature retaliated, swiping him aside with a powerful blow. Kaldor rushed forward, wielding the shard and the blade fragment together. The two pieces resonated, their combined energy forming a faint, shimmering edge of golden light. With a roar of determination, Kaldor swung the makeshift weapon, slicing through the creature's tendrils. The beast shrieked, its form destabilizing under the assault. Kaldor pressed the attack, each strike driving the creature further back until, with a final, blinding slash, it dissolved into nothingness. Panting, Kaldor turned to Riven, who was bruised but alive. "You all right?" "I've been better," Riven grunted, pulling himself to his feet. He eyed the blade fragment in Kaldor's hand. "Looks like you've got yourself a real weapon now." Kaldor held the fragment up, feeling its power coursing through him. The light forge was far from complete, but this was a start. He sheathed the fragment and helped Riven to his feet. "The Vorith won't stop coming," Kaldor said. "Then we keep moving," Riven replied. Together, they left the Vale, the shard and blade fragment glowing brighter than before. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, Kaldor felt they had a fighting chance. The city of Loren stood as the last bastion of hope for Eryndor, its high walls and towering spires silhouetted against the murky horizon. Kaldor and Riven arrived at dusk, the shard and blade fragment glowing faintly beneath the gloom. The city's defenders, weary and bloodied, lined the battlements, their faces a mix of determination and despair. The Vorith's army was already assembling. Shadow beasts and corrupted soldiers marched in unison, their sheer numbers threatening to swallow Loren whole. Above them loomed the Vorith's lieutenant, a towering figure clad in blackened armor, its eyes burning with crimson fire. Kaldor and Riven were brought before Commander Eryndor, Loren's stern but battle-hardened leader. Her gaze lingered on the glowing fragments Kaldor carried. "So, the Light Forge lives," she said, her voice tinged with both awe and skepticism. "But 2 fragments won't win this war. We're outnumbered 100-1. Kaldor met her eyes. "We don't need to win the war tonight. We just need to hold the line long enough for me to face the Vorith's lieutenant. If I can weaken it, the Vorith's grip on its forces will falter." Eryndor hesitated, then nodded. "You'll have your chance. But if you fail, the city falls." The defenders braced for battle as the Vorith's forces surged forward. Kaldor stood at the forefront, the blade fragment in one hand and the shard in the other. As the shadow beasts closed in, he raised the shard, and its light exploded outward, momentarily blinding the enemy and invigorating the defenders. "Hold your ground," Kaldor shouted, his voice carrying above the chaos. The battle erupted in a cacophony of screams and steel. Kaldor fought with precision, the Lightforge's fragments cutting through shadow beasts like a torch through fog. Riven was a whirlwind of raw strength beside him, his maul crushing anything that dared approach. But the Vorith's lieutenant was watching. With a guttural roar, the dark figure leaped from its perch, landing heavily in the center of the battlefield. The ground cracked beneath its weight as it drew a massive, jagged blade. Its presence was suffocating, its aura spreading fear among the defenders. Kaldor stepped forward, the light forge fragments humming in his hands. "Your reign ends here," he said, his voice steady. The lieutenant responded with a guttural laugh before charging. Their blades clashed, sending shockwaves through the air. Kaldor fought fiercely, but the creature's strength was overwhelming, its strikes relentless. As Kaldor faltered, the shard flared with blinding light, momentarily stunning the lieutenant. The runes on the blade fragment pulsed in sync, and Kaldor felt a surge of energy coursing through him. Drawing on the fragment's power, he unleashed a devastating strike, cleaving through the lieutenant's armor. The creature roared in pain as its form began to unravel, shadow dissipating into the night. The Voritha's forces hesitated, their cohesion breaking. Seizing the moment, Lauren's defenders rallied, driving the enemy back. Exhausted but victorious, Kaldor stood amidst the battlefield, the fragments glowing brighter than ever. The Voritha's grip had weakened, but the war was far from over. As the dawn broke, Kaldor turned to Riven and Elira. "This was just the beginning. We have a weapon to reforge and a world to save." They nodded, determination etched into their faces. Together, they would fight to reclaim Eryndor from the darkness.